"What's the hardest thing about being on death row?" And without skipping a beat, the man said, "Oh, wondering if my life has any kind of meaning at all."
So I went to the juvenile hall my very first day, and it was very stark. And there was this fence, and there was that fence, and the banging, and the noise. And I could see pain on the faces of the children, and I was so shocked by what I was seeing. This is an underworld. I kept asking myself, who knows about this? Who has seen this?
There was no natural light at all in the facility. And the fact that these folks were living in that kind of a situation kind of would parallel the darkness that a lot of them were living in, and not much was being done to help them kind of get out of that darkness.
But at the very end of our conversation, I talked to this kid, and he was 31 years old, and he hadn't seen his parents, I don't know, for years. He was locked up in a cell for 23 and a half hours a day or whatever it was. And at the very end of our time, it was 20 minutes maybe, I just stood up and I gave him a hug. And this is this big gangster. He just started bawling. And I'll never forget this. He says, "Father Mike, you're the first person that touched me as a human being in more years than I can ever remember." And he says, "Just tell my parents I'm still a human being."
For a long time, the church has been present to the incarcerated. We have a long history of being chaplains in prison.
One of the most important things we do as church, is to help people heal. Maybe that was our job, was try to bring light into that darkness.
Restorative justice asks who's hurt and what do they need and how can we help them? And how can we help people who have committed crimes understand the pain that they have caused and how they can change?
The questions that need to be asked are who's been affected, who's been harmed by this crime, and what do they need for healing, and who's going to help them in that healing process.
We're working with all people, affected by crime, and the families and the victims, first and foremost, and of course people inside were often victims before they became offenders.
Restorative justice is not a free path to freedom whatsoever. To me, is a true justice that it understands and sees the whole situation of criminality from the victim's perspective and from the perpetrator's perspective, but seeing the whole picture, seeing where this person who has committed a crime comes from, what is the environment in which this person was raised.
People hurt each other. And I always use the phrase, hurt people hurt people. And most of the people I've met who have hurt people, harmed the community, were first hurt. We have to acknowledge that. Most every offender I've ever met was first violated, emotionally, physically, spiritually, intellectually. Now, it doesn't excuse what they've done, because with harm comes obligations.
I do see is a great desire on the men and the women to make up for whatever they feel they have done wrong in their lives. For the most part, they are very honest about the decisions that they made, and they try to really understand what led them to make those decisions, and they want to make up for it as much as they can.
The concept is easy to explain. It's the opposite of retributive justice, and you're trying to heal the community. The experience of restorative justice is a whole different matter.
It's mending the broken heart. It's mending broken hearts with responsibility and forgiveness, both.
How do you hold people? How do you create a sanctuary where people can then become the sanctuary that they sought there? And then they can go home to their kids and for the first time present that sanctuary to their own kids. And then you've broken a cycle for the first time.
We always say the biggest concepts are listening, presence, accompaniment, and a lot of times it's just being there. Anybody could say, well, if I go with the victim, or if I, what would I say? What would I tell the incarcerated? What am I going to do? And a lot of times the biggest thing is being there. there's that sense of when you're there from somebody, whether it's one-to-one or a group, there is an openness and there is a reception, especially as you continue to come back and you show you're consistent.
First is being to these incarcerated folks the presence that they need, because they're living in dehumanizing situation where most people are not present to them. And the higher up the security ladder you go, that is to say in the high security prisons, the dehumanization is unbelievably bad. They cannot be themselves. It's simply too dangerous.
Every one of them, in my experience, was a victim before they became a victimizer. And if their victimization is not dealt with, and they don't heal from that, they will probably continue victimizing other people. And to me, that has to be the main part of our ministry, is helping them to heal from whatever happened to them, help them come to the realization of the incredible people that they truly are, and the possibilities that they have of doing incredible things in their life.
Within prison walls, I personally believe, are some of the most amazing, holy, transformed messengers of who God is.
These are the folks who know what it's like to have been cut off, and because they've suffered in this way, God thinks they're trustworthy guides to lead the rest of us to the kinship of God. And so that's been sort of my experience, that my conversations with gang members in particular, those who are detained, that you end up standing in awe at what people have to carry rather than in judgment at how they carry it.
I had to say, the very first few days I was a little intimidated, to see this big man, so physically fit, well, those, with so many tattoos and that kind of thing. And but then I realized that they were really very caring people, very respectful, and with a great interest in growing in their faith and forming communities there among themselves. And so very soon I didn't see any tattoos or anything like that. I felt really at home with them. But they made that possible.
It really changed my spirituality. It changed my notion of prayer. It changed my notion of Jesus. It changed my biblical orientation. It really changed just about everything about my religious practices that wasn't anticipated at all.
So what gives me life is to be with people that for some reason are in that very moment in their lives where they are finding God, and they're thirsty and they're hungry and they're ready for something. And when you're ready and you're able to go to that deep sea diving, when you could talk to a man that's killed people and you don't run away and you don't look away from their eyes, and you can go through that pain, the face of God is revealed. No training can give that to you. It's your own inner life.
Imagine a circle of compassion, and now imagine nobody standing outside that circle. And so that's why you go into prisons, because you want to widen the circle. You want to dismantle the barriers that exclude. Well, you want to take seriously what Jesus took seriously: inclusion, nonviolence, unconditional loving kindness, and compassionate acceptance. It's very clarifying to focus on the things that Jesus takes seriously.
Jesus is the par excellence image of restorative justice. If restorative justice is restoring right relationship, Jesus is all about that. He's going into all kinds of places and people that are disturbed in their relationships, be they rich or poor, Pharisee or Gentile or whatever. He's trying to restore relationships among people so that everyone can thrive.
For us in this ministry, we can be discouraged because there's still a lot of darkness out there in a lot of people's lives and in our systems. But for a lot of times, we may be that one light.
Every Catholic in the pew should know that they're invited. They're invited to be part of what is happening in our church. in and around restorative justice and every other issue.
I believe that violence is not a solution to any problem.
Yo creo que la violencia no soluciona ningún problema.
I believe that every person is endowed with sacred dignity.
Yo creo que todo ser humano es dotado de una dignidad sagrada.
I believe that every person is capable of changing, healing, and being restored.
Yo creo que toda persona tiene la capacidad de cambiar, sanar y ser restaurada.
I pledge to respect the dignity of every person.
Yo me comprometo a respetar la dignidad de todas las personas.
I pledge to overcome violence with love and compassion.
Yo me comprometo a superar la violencia con amor y compasión.
I pledge to accompany and support anyone affected by crime on their healing journey.
Yo me prometo acompañar y apoyar a todos los que hayan sido afectados por el crimen en su jornada de sanación.
I pledge to be an instrument of restoration, of forgiveness, and reconciliation.
Me comprometo a ser un instrumento de restauración, de perdón y de reconciliación.